Hello Class 2, today I'm going to be reading a new story. I'm going to leave The Bubble Boy because the general consensus was not many of you were enjoying it. So after much consideration, the book I've chosen to read to you, which has been highly recommended by my son who's in year 6 and has had some really good reviews, is a book called, wait for it, The Lion Boy. Now this book is about a boy called Charlie who can speak cat. He takes it for granted, but when his mum and dad go missing, the cats are the only friends he can turn to. Setting out to find his parents, Charlie stows away on an incredible circus ship bound for Paris. On board he meets 6 proud, beautiful lions who need his help. Sounds good. Okay, chapter 1. One Saturday afternoon in September, Charlie's mum was up a ladder in the backyard, doing things to plants halfway up the wall. Charlie didn't know what or care. He liked the yard, the gorgeous honey and lemon smell of the flowers, and the great Christmas tree that hung over the back wall, with its shiny silver and green and purple fruits that he would harvest towards midwinter and sell at the market. He liked climbing about in the tree and in the ruins beyond, running down to the river and talking to the cats that lived down there. But he didn't care what his mum was doing up the ladder until he heard a shriek and a clatter and a rude word, and he ran out to see. His mum was on all fours on the ladder, on the ground, with festoons of the honey-smelling plant around her, her red hair wild and her face as white as ice. Stupid, stupid, she was muttering. No, you're not, said Charlie. He offered her his hand and she pulled up to her feet, wincing. You wouldn't be a professor if you were stupid. Clever people can do stupid things, she said. Let me into the house. She hobbled inside and Charlie followed, worried but not worried, because his mum was the strongest, cleverest, bravest person in the world. Apart from his dad, of course, and if anyone could handle falling off a ladder, she could. Oh, she said. Charlie had already passed her the arnica, a chocolate biscuit and a small bottle of her secret shop remedy, which she made in her laboratory and which smelt of comfort and brandy and sweet winter herbs. Best take a look, she said, and slid carefully out of the long leather breeches she always wore for outdoor work. Oh, they both said, at the sight of the raw red grazes, the pinky purple swellings and the nasty gashes which adorned her shins. Charlie handed over a clean paper cloth and Mum dabbed at her wound. Bring me some blood-stopper lotion, she said. 27 bread. It's in the rack. She handed Charlie the keys to her lab. Charlie smiled. Mum, Professor Magdalen Start, PhD, MD, kept her laboratory locked on strict instructions of the government, indeed of the empire, because her work was so important that no one was to be allowed to know anything about it. Except, of course, for Charlie's dad, Aniba Shanti, Doctor of Indoctorica and Tropical Sciences at the University of Arca in Ghana, currently second to London University. Chief of knowledge of all the tribes of Akan and brother of lions who knew all about it because they worked together. Charlie's dad knew everything that had ever been known about the plants of the West African forest, what they were good for and what was good for them. Your mum and I have different ways of knowing about the same thing, Dad would say. Excellent system. Charlie was honoured. Every day these days he was allowed to do new things that showed that they realised he was growing up. Last Christmas he'd been allowed to do the whole stall and sell the shiny fruit himself. Alone, coming back from his lessons, he was allowed to hang out for a while at the fountain, drinking sherbets and playing football with the other kids, and now he was allowed to fetch lotion from his mother's lab. It felt good being big. In the rack by the door, Mum said with a little smile. He'd been inside the lab before, of course, as a baby, after they'd come here to London from Africa. He'd practically lived in there. While Mum worked mixing and smelling and flicking between her burners and her computer screen, he'd paddle about the place in a sort of pair of knickers hung on a wheeled frame. He could scoot and whiz and once disappear completely under the table so Mum couldn't find him. He'd loved his knickers on wheels. He loved the lab too, because it was in a separate shed in the backyard. It had always seemed like a different world. Pushing over the door now, he caught a waft of the smell of it, somewhere between a cake baking, old books, sweet strong incense, and underneath it all, the hard, cold smell of science. It looked like it smelt. The walls were old and panelled with well-polished dark wood. The benches too, the left were gleaming steel with glass cupboards. VDU screens and instruments of the most precise and modern specifications, while to the left a huge old wooden table stood empty for a massive globe beneath a rack of hanging dried herbs. Along the back wall was stacked shelf upon shelf of books, ancient leather-bound, colourful paperbacks, smart-looking hardback parchments laid out flat, and scrolls rolled tight and piled carefully, plus CD-ROMs and DVDs, chrome-coloured discs full of information, and old, thick black vinyl discs which played a machine with a huge curling horn. It seemed to Charlie that all of the knowledge in the world, past and present, lived in his mother's laboratory, and if it didn't, you could find out here where it did live. By the door was a tall, flattish wooden rack made of rows of shelves. On each shelf was a row of small, shiny, coloured glass bottles held in place by a little wooden bar along the front. If you looked carefully, you could see that the colour was not in the glass, but in the contents of the bottle, and they were arranged in order of colour like a rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Charlie craned up to where the reds began in the top left-hand corner and scanned along the shelves looking for 27 red. There it was, a deep crimson, blood-coloured, only not so thick-looking. He reached up for it and, giving the lab a last yearning look, took it back to where his mother was waiting in the kitchen. "Thank you, sweetie," she said, and she was about to lift the lid and drip a drop of the lotion on her still bleeding wound when she hesitated. "Bring me a pen and paper," she said suddenly. Charlie fetched one of the strong swinging glass pens that they used for every day, and the green kitchen ink and a scrap of envelope. "Proper paper," she said, and he brought a piece of heavy clean parchment from the drawer. Mum pulled herself up, and as she did so the movement made the blood bubble a little more from her shin. She took no notice. Instead she lifted her leg and laid it along the kitchen table as if she were doing her yoga, her ballet. The parchment lay on the kitchen table. The ink was ignored. Mum took the Venetian pen and cautiously dipped it in the beading blood of her wound. Charlie stared. "Don't worry," she said to him. "I just thought of something I've been meaning to do for a while." He still stared. Mum started to write. By dipping the sharp little nib in her deepest cut, she had enough blood to write a full, elegant paragraph and a signature. "What is it?" he asked, feeling a little ill. "You'll know soon enough," she said. She flattened the parchment gently and watched the scarlet turn to a delicate brown. It looked like a magical text, an ancient spell, a decree by some all-powerful and long-dead king or queen. "I'm putting it up here," she said, as she rolled it up, tied it quickly and popped it behind the photo of her and a neighbour on honeymoon in Venice, on the top shelf of the dresser. "And Charlie," here she stopped and looked at him, her blue eyes sure and clear, "if you need to go anywhere, take it with you." A sudden sharp sense of importance welled up inside him. She didn't mean take it to the bathroom or take it when you go to bed. She meant something bigger, more grown up, more important. Sometimes Charlie felt that the grown-ups around him existed on that other level, talking of things they didn't mention to him, minding things, dealing with things that were not to do with children. Until recently he had ignored it and carried on reading his book or taking extra biscuits while they weren't paying attention. But lately there'd been a lot of talking downstairs after he'd gone to bed, a lot of hushed telephone calls and furrowed brows. This look in his mother's eyes, the sudden mysterious writing on blood, were to do the same things, he was sure. Just then the great noise that heralded the return of Dad started up. There was a Ghanaian song about dinner, delicious manona with spicy dor-dor, that he sang to himself whenever he wasn't doing anything else. You could hear it from the distance as he strolled up the street. Then the firm, solid tread of his feet crossing the yard, and the jangle of his big bunch of keys, because once again he hasn't noticed that the door is unlocked. 3, 2, 1, Charlie counted down in his head, and his timing was perfect. On blast off came Dad's huge voice calling out, "Hello, hello, where's my family?" Charlie's dad, you ought to know, was huge. Not just a big man, but huge. He wasn't technically a giant, but Charlie thought he might have giant blood, and this worried him sometimes because if his dad had giant blood, then so did he. And that made the whole thing of, "You're a big boy now, growing nice and big like your dad," a different ballgame. Charlie was proud and happy to be brown, both black like his dad and white like his mum, he said, but he wasn't sure he wanted to be a giant as well. Once in a museum, Charlie had seen some armour from ancient Greek times, a breastplate made in the shape of a man's body, with all the muscles and even the ballet button moulded in beaten bronze. That's what Charlie's dad looked like with his shirt off, like he was still wearing armour. He had huge arms, and the veins on them looked like rivers on a map, only they stood out. He had huge legs and shoulders as wide as a small shed, and a neck like a tree. And he walked straight and tall and smiling, and everyone got out of his way and turned to look at him after he had passed. When he closed down the smile in his eyes and let his mouth lie stern, he was the most frightening looking man. Then when his smile burst through and his white teeth shone and his eyes crinkled up and his cheeks went into little apple shapes, he was like the god of happiness. "We're in the kitchen," called Mum. "She's broken," called Charlie. "No, I'm not," said Mum, finally dripping the blood-stopper lotion onto her cuts, and the evening descended into a sweet time of Mum lying around telling jokes, Dad cooking dinner, Charlie watching The Simpsons and staying up late because there was no lessons on a Sunday. He forgot all about the parchment written in blood and didn't think of it again until 6 months later when he came home to find that his parents had disappeared. Okay, that's the end of chapter 1. Interesting. See you tomorrow.